my name is Winston Francis, and they do call me Mr. Fixit. And the reason for that is because about 50 odd years ago, I wrote a song called Mr. Fixit. The night when I recorded it, Mr. Clement Dodd, I remember him coming into the studio because the bands would record all the artists all day long. And in the night, Mr. Dodd would come in and sit and have a listen to all the tracks that were recorded, and then he'd choose maybe out of 15 or 20 songs, he'd choose maybe 5 or 10, that he figured, because this guy was a complete genius. I've heard so many people talk about Coxsone Dodd and the things that artists complaining that he didn't pay them, a lot of bad vibes, but believe it or not, if Mr. Dodd was to come into this place today, I'd kiss the ground that he walked on, because the man is one of the greatest people I know, one of the greatest mentors. Let me just say quickly before I go into Mr. Fixit that a lot of artists that complain about not getting paid. I remember the first recording I did for Mr. Dodd was over 50 odd years ago, and because of him, I'm sitting in this chair doing an interview, because nobody would know who Winston Francis is if it wasn't for Clement Dodd. So I have to give thanks and praise to him. Yeah. Getting back to the night when I recorded Mr. Fixit, the day I recorded Mr. Fixit, the night he came in and he sat down and he was listening to the tracks. And when he came to Mr. Fixit and he listened, I said to him, Mr. Dodd, could you turn up the sound a little bit more? I can't hear it. And he said, Winston, don't listen with your ears, listen with your heart. That is the way you listen to music. And I embraced that, and I've kept that in my computer ever since, that you don't have to listen to music blaring and blasting to get the good sound and the good quality of the song. So when he continued listening, he said to me, Winston, this song you just recorded, he said, what is the name of it? What do you call it? I said, Mr. Fixit. And he says, this song is going to carry for the rest of your life. And it's so true. It has been carrying me for all my life, as long as I can remember. Because so far, I think about 30 people have recorded Mr. Fixit, including Freddie McGregor, John Holt, Yellowman, Coco T, The Cool Ruler, Gregory Isaacs recorded Mr. Fixit, and so many people have recorded it. One of the versions I heard that was recorded maybe 5 or 6 years ago was Beres Hammond, and I heard it a few months ago. So, everybody's recorded Mr. Fixit. So Coxsone Dodd was absolutely right. That song is going to take me right through my life. One of the greatest financial rewards I've had from Mr. Fixit, it was when UB40 recorded in 1979, because of their royalties, their first initial payment to me for recording a song, I bought my first home. So to them, UB40, I give thanks and praises. And talking about a group like UB40, not getting away from Studio One, but I've heard so many people say, oh, it's, some white guys playing, they take our music and they play it. But if it wasn't for these white guys, I wouldn't own a home, So I have to give them thanks. It doesn't matter, and we're not talking about race here or color, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about reggae music. And I would like to point this out, that some people have got the feeling or the saying that reggae music cannot be played by anyone that doesn't come from Jamaica. It's only Jamaicans that can play reggae. That is so wrong. And I'd like to tell them that reggae music was not created by Jamaicans alone, because Tommy McCook, who's one of the pioneers in reggae music, was Panamanian. You had Lynn Tate and his Jets, who came from Barbados. You had a guy from Australia, a white guy from Australia called Dennis Sindri. People forget that these people weren't Jamaicans. They were foreigners who came to Jamaica, fell in love with the country, fell in love with the culture, and got involved with the music and created something. So it wasn't Jamaicans alone. And a lot of people seem to forget that these people, contributed to the music. So we have to give them thanks and forget the myth that, it's only Jamaicans that can play reggae. Some of the greatest reggae bands I've heard today are from Japan, from Thailand, from Ethiopia, from Germany, from Holland. And so, when it comes to reggae music, you cannot put race or color into it. You just have to accept the music for what it is, because it's the most beautiful music on earth. It's so easy to listen to. And to prove that to you, if you ask a Japanese who loves opera or ballet, he will listen to, comes out of a ballet, goes straight into a reggae dance and enjoy it just the same way. So it's quality music. So reggae is a blessed music, but it was not created by one set of people. It was a collective thing. And that is the reason why the music is so outstanding, and that is the reason why it's alive and kicking today. Talking about the sound systems, the sound systems was the vehicle that made the music popular, because there was no radio at the time in Jamaica. There was only one radio station in Jamaica called Radio RJR, and we used to the RJR had a thing that they called, it was RJR and rediffusion. Now rediffusion was an extension of the radio, but what it was a wire that was connected directly from the studio, from the radio station, to the home. And it was just a little square box. I don't know if you remember that, Jerry. It was a little square box with one knob, on and off. Mm-hmm. There was no, you couldn't tune it or so, and the music was piped directly from the radio station to this box. So the only way and at that time, they weren't playing, reggae music. Reggae, was in its infancy, during this period, and they were playing a lot of American music, and that's how we coned our trade, by listening to American guys, So it's so ironic that, years later, American guys are taking our music, reggae music, and changing it around and making it their music. Because at that time, we were taking American music and making it our own. So we used to listen to great guys like Sam Cooke, Nat King Cole, and we listened to a lot of country music. A lot of country music. So, if you can see how the music, evolved, by a lot of different, singers, artists. One of my pet love was a group called the Drifters. I used to love the Drifters, and my mom collected a lot of Drifters records, so I used to be singing Drifters all day. I love Sam Cooke. I was singing Sam Cooke till people started saying, you sound like Sam Cooke now. And then I started listening to Nat King Cole, and people said, well, you sound like Nat King Cole. So, it's just the different music that was coming in, and we were embracing it and then expressing it ourselves on record. So by this time, you find that the sound systems were the only vehicle to really broadcast the music and bring the music to the public. And at that time, people were hungry to hear, good music and different music. And listening to the radio station, it was just high frequency music. But when you went to the dance and you heard the sound systems, it was the deep bass lines. It were the 18-inch speakers, going boom, boom, boom. And it used to be magic to stand before we used to call them the House of Joy, the music, the sound system boxes, the 18-inch speakers, and sometimes they would be like 6 foot, in height, and maybe 2 foot across. And when you hear the bass thumping, and most of these amplifiers weren't, made in the States. They were made by local people, engineers, which in that period also, people were trying, trial and failure. They were using different components, and everybody was trying to get the bass, the best bass that they could. So when you went into a dance, you could feel that bass hitting your chest, and every time there was a dance, it doesn't matter how many dances there would be that night, or especially on the weekends, a Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night, they would all be packed out with people, just enjoying that new music, and it was so funny that all of the sound systems, they were competing against each other, and the studios also. So you had guys like Duke Reed. He would be in competition with Coxsone, and if they made a record, and let's say Derek Morgan recorded a track for Studio One, as soon as he'd finished, he'd go and record it also for Duke Reed. So when they both played, says, "This is exclusive. Nobody else can play this," and he put that on. When you listen on the other side of the road, you hear the same track by Derek Morgan coming across, because this is a way of earning money. The more records you make, the more money you make. So the guys were just going, from studio to studio, recording songs and recording, and what the sound system would do, they would keep that record for maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years before they put it on a stamper. They were doing, we used to call them soft wax, which was, today you call them dubs. Yeah, they were acetates, and that's why we call them soft wax. So they would keep these acetates for 3, 4 years. They had to recut them all the time because they were being damaged by the needle. So what was happening then is, after a while, they would release the record. But when they released the record, they would scratch off the names of the singer, so the competitor wouldn't know who was singing it. But by then everybody know who was singing what. So but it was good, because you had several sound systems that were really outstanding, like Prince Buster's sound system, was very outstanding. You had Lloyd the Matador, which was another outstanding sound, and most of the sound had their own label, and recording their own songs, like the Matador, really broke open when he recorded Little Roy, and from what I was told, what he said, Little Roy said, Matador came to the school and took him out of school and took him into the studio to record. So, and then you had like Duke Reed got Alton Ellis, and he recorded Alton, and he was shouting exclusive. But as soon as Alton was finished recording for him, he'd go up to Coxsone and record. I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I think I must have been one of the only singers, that was in the business who recorded exclusively for Coxsone, because there are not many records around with me, with anyone else. I recorded a few songs for World Records and for Edward Seaga, who was the then Prime Minister. I recorded a couple of songs for his studio and also for World. But really, you can't find any more records with me, only exclusively for Coxsone. Because I was so, when I went to record in Studio One, it was like going to a university, because you learned so much and you gained so much from Studio One, and his mother was a beautiful woman, because she'd always be cooking, but not for everybody, but I'd always get a nice lunch from her, so I was happy to go to Studio One and stay at Studio One. So yeah, Studio One was fantastic. Well, when I recorded Mr. Fixit, the album, it wasn't really an album. I didn't go in to record an album. Mr. Dodd gave us certain songs, because Mr. Dodd was the kind of guy that he could hear a song and right away he would say, this song is for Prince Fatty, and this song is for Jerry Lyon, and this song is for that one or that one. He knew from the sound of the record, because we did a lot of covers. And the reason for us doing a lot of covers is that we didn't think at the time of recording that one of the records would leave the shores of Jamaica. We just recorded the songs for Jamaica, not realizing that people were taking the records. You had a lot of immigrants that were coming to England. They were taking records with them and playing it in parties here in England. And maybe a visitor from Australia was at one of the parties and he fell in love with the music and took it to Australia. So the music started immigrating, and a lot of the music that was being exported, yeah, were just simple covers. But a lot of the songs, we made an addition to the songs to make them a bit different. You know, like when Bob Marley recorded One Love, it was a Curtis Mayfield song called People Get Ready, the Train is Coming. Yeah? But the good thing about it is when the One Love left the shores of Jamaica, you know, Curtis Mayfield himself said he was glad that Bob recorded One Love because he got more residuals from One Love than his own song. So, you know, we did a lot of good, you know. So, talking about the singles that we were recording, I remember one day, it was a Saturday morning, and I went down to the studio, and when I got there, it was dark in the studio, and I turned on the lights, and Jackie Miitoo was asleep on the piano, because it was a grand piano, and a grand piano it's a big thing, and it's got a big cover, so, you know, Jackie was sleeping on the grand piano top. So being a troublesome young man, I came in and I lifted up the lid that covered the keyboard, and I slammed it, and he jumped up. And when he jumped up, he said, "What a blood clot do you, man?" And I said, "Cool, you all right?" And he said, "Cobra, man." Because I've got a nickname in Jamaica that they call me Cobra, which is a snake, Cobra Man. So he said, "Cobra, what's wrong with you, man?" And I said, "Cool, man, you all right?" And he says, "Boy," he said, "I have a wicked vibes inside my head, man." He said, I got this tune. He said, you any coffee around the place? You drink anything yet? So I said, "You want a coffee?" And he said, "Yeah." So I went across the street because there was what he called a cold supper shop across the street. And a lot of people would not know what cold supper meant, because supper is something that is served. You know, I don't know about other countries, but in Jamaica we have supper in the say about 6 o'clock in the evening after dinner. A couple of hours after dinner we have supper, right? That is before you go to bed, right? So they call it cold supper because you get this in the morning, in the day, so the supper is cold, right? So we call it a cold supper shop, and it's a little tiny shack, you know, and we have millions of them in Jamaica. So I went over and I got 2 cups of coffee from the guy in the cold supper shop, brought it over to Jackie, and when I came back, he was playing, you know, and playing this ding dun 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 dun, and I started, you know, and he said, have you got a song for it? And I started just chanting, "Let's go to Zion, let's go to Zion, let's go to Zion, I'm going home." And that was how we started. And this was about 10 o'clock in the morning, and by about 12 o'clock, Ernest Ranglin came, and he was playing guitar. Leroy Sibbles came in, and he was playing bass. Rickenbacker, the guitarist, and it was Horsemouth, not Horseman, Horsemouth Wallace was playing drums, and we just started jamming, and within 20 minutes, that song was created. "Let's Go to Zion." Again, that is like a milestone for me because it's one of my biggest sellers through the years. "Let's Go to Zion." And in that studio at that time, you had one of the greatest guitar players in the world, which was Ernest Ranglin. You had Rickenbacker, also on guitar. The drummer was Horsemouth Wallace, yeah, and he was a great drummer. You had, did I say Leroy Sibbles playing bass? You know, but all of us came together, and we had one of the greatest engineers you could think of, which is a guy called Sylvan Morris. You know, God bless his soul. I was told that he's going a bit blind today, but you know, this guy was so creative and such a great engineer. And you have to try and remember that, you know, these guys had no formal training in electronics. They didn't go to school. It's just something that they picked up and started creating with it. And today, the world is listening to works by Sylvan Morris. You know, so it was such a great time and a great period, you know, where you had so many great musicians passing through Studio One. You know, you had Chinese, you know, because in Jamaica there's a big, you know, population of Chinese. The second generation, you can't call them Chinese, you have to call them Jamaicans, because they speak patois, yes, more than I do, right? You have the Indians, yeah? So it's a diverse society in Jamaica, you know, and a lot of these guys that were coming through as young musicians. So you had Indians playing music, you know, you had Chinese, you know, you had black Negroes, you had a lot of Caucasian mixed, you had mixed race, you had, you know, it was just a big melting pot of people as young musicians who were coming through and raising, you know, a hell of a racket and teaching the rest of the world how to love and live and play good music.